Good afternoon. My name is Javon Collins, Performing Arts Director at the King Arts Complex. We'd like to welcome you to the 2021 All Arts Day honoring Aminah Robinson virtual presentation. On behalf of our Board of Trustees, Executive Director Demetrius Nilly, our staff and volunteers, we'd like to welcome you to our Easton exhibit space here at Easton Town Center. We would like to thank our sponsors, presenting sponsor, Easton Community Foundation, and additional support provided by the American Electric Power Foundation, the City of Columbus, the Columbus Foundation, the Columbus Museum of Art, Crabb, Brown & James, LLP, the Greater Columbus Arts Council, Homage, L Brands Foundation, the Martin Luther King Breakfast Committee Incorporated, Nationwide Foundation, and the Ohio Arts Council. Aminah Robinson was born on February 18, 1940. She became one of the most prolific artists in the Near East Side. You can see her artwork throughout the city, especially at the King Arts Complex. But we are so excited about today's virtual program as we get to take a special visit to Aminah Robinson's home, as well as speak to some amazing artists that have helped the King Arts Complex in the past year. Our winners from the Martin Unites art exhibition and Heart of Protest mural artists who will be interviewed during today's presentation. We also have some other artists that have presented during the Aminah Robinson All Arts Day. This is the 6th year that the King Arts Complex has presented an All Arts Day honoring Aminah Robinson. We appreciate all that she's done in our community as an artist and inspired the future artists of Columbus. So without further ado, we welcome you to the 2021 All Arts Day honoring Aminah Robinson.
Timelessness of Life, Pages in History. Page 1, Life and Times of John T. Ward. Born March 19, 1820 in Richmond, Virginia, his parents John and Mary Ward were free people. John T. Ward came to Columbus, Franklin County, Ohio in the year 1836 at the age of 16. John T. Ward and Catherine Moss were married in 1838 and moved to a farm located off the National Pike, Friend Street, now known as Main Street, west of Big Walnut Creek in Druid Township. This marriage produced 3 sons and 5 daughters. After John T. Ward's arrival in Columbus, he joined the Second Baptist Church. In 1842, he became active in the abolition movement Underground Railroad for some 40 years to follow. He operated a farm that provided seclusion for escaped slaves to hide. During the Civil War period, John T. Ward was a contractor hauler for the U.S. government. He operated a praying wagon serving downtown area of Columbus. One of John's sons, William S. Ward, established the Ward Transfer Line, which became the E.E. Ward Transfer and Storage Company. The operation is over 99 years old and is and has been family-owned. John T. Ward is the great-grandfather to Eldon Ward, who is presently manager of the E.E. Ward Storage and Transfer Company, Columbus, Ohio.
Hey, what's up everybody? Come on in, let me show you around Aminah's house. What you're looking at here is our living room. This is the area actually where she would sleep a lot of times, which is pretty funny because the sense of a true artist. So I take a lot of naps here on this couch. But what we'll start off with, guys, over here in this area, we have a few of Aminah's sculptures, just collectibles, totems. We keep them archived in here on display constantly, along with a few of her brushes, which is always great. So it's nice to have these around for inspiration. And then what we currently have on display also is the Raganon, which is the exhibition going on at the Columbus Museum of Art. So that's a nice new piece to have in the collection. What you'll see along here, actually, which is pretty interesting, is kind of what Aminah was into when it comes to what she would read. She's a constant learner. So you'll see just this is a collection of languages. And the cool thing, a lot of times what you can see is she'll have her signature or when she got the book. So like, you know, Cairo, Egypt, 1979. So there's cool little things like that that you'll see around the house as you explore. What we have back here is actually, this is really cool. This is one of her dolls she created. And I always kind of like the attitude the characters have, right? The personality, because a lot of times her work is very abstracted. So to see something like this shows like the discipline still. And then a lot of times when I'm in the living room, I like to just look at the pictures. So this is a lot of Mina from the early 90s, I want to assume, because I recall this one from being from like, I think one of our first exhibitions at the museum. So it's really cool just to see that. All right, so in the next room that we have, it's the sunroom. And the cool thing about this room is usually I'm up around like 6 a.m. And what I do is just come in here and meditate, do yoga. And I have my succulents in here to try to activate the space. But the cool thing is that we have a few of Aminah's things in here that I really appreciate. The first one's the picture of her son and her. This one's like a jewel, because the cool thing about this, it says the Arts Festival 1973, and so that's her in Sydney there. So this is like a way to honor her every morning. So this is one of the pictures that like I really connect with. And so I kind of use this room just as a spiritual space. And you know, once again, during Aminah's time here, this was filled with art, tons of tapestries, tons of books, tons of stuff. So yeah, so that's this room. Another thing that I really enjoy about the house is right here. We have the door. This is the front door for the entrance past the foyer. And the cool thing about this is it's not necessarily carved into, but it's carved and then adhered to the door. Because I would sit on the couch and look at it and be like, how did she do this? How did she make it? And so I come to figure it out. But also the cool thing is that it's double-sided. So you'll see on the back side, this says Aminah Print Shop. We had another one that's like a welcoming sign, but that's currently not here. No biggie. We still have the integrity of the door. Another thing I would like to highlight that you'll see around the house is all these names and like little messages. What this stuff is that the entire wall was originally covered. So when people would visit, Aminah would have them, you know, write their information on the wall. Some of the names are familiar, some of them aren't. As an example, we can look here and you can see that Lynn Logan Grime was here in July of 2012, which is pretty hilarious, pretty cool that, you know, we have that touchstone, right? Now what the museum did, which I thought was a brilliant idea, was that they curated the space they covered the paint, and they photographed everything, first off, so let's be clear. But then they archived some of the pieces into shapes, forms that we're familiar with that Aminah Robinson would create. So it creates like a nice flow through the house, I feel. And it's really cool just to like read these and discover new ideas, those kind of things. And then sometimes I see things in them I didn't read before. So yeah, so this is another thing I really like about the house. And that's the living room so far. So this is the dining room, kind of, you know, where you eat dinner. So the cool thing about this room though, the points I want to highlight first off is that we have the narrative on the wall. So you can come on in and follow me. And what you'll see if you turn around and look at the first one, the man who crossed the river. And so with this, she goes through and tells the tale. And I don't personally know the tale that well, I apologize, but we can still appreciate the artwork in the space. The second thing that I wanted to highlight in this room specifically is that when they restored the house, they kept the integrity of the floor down here. So what you're seeing on the floor is actually like Aminah Robinson's drips and paints, and it's kind of like really cool. It's almost a painting in itself. So it's one of those things where this is like years and years of experience, like in one spot. So, you know, it's really cool to just be able to eat dinner and see that. So it's like, once again, constantly around art. So yeah, I actually spend a lot of time in this room. I usually draw in here, and so it's kind of like a spiritual process for me when I work in this room too. And then another thing that you'll be able to see when you visit, we have before and after pictures in every room. So this kind of gives you the vibe of the space prior, which I think, you know, you can just once again get into the spirit of Aminah.
My name is Aminah Idroma, and I go by Ada or Adobe for short. I'm from Columbus, Ohio, and I am a painter. I work mainly with acrylic, and I like to paint on wood panels. And most of my art is basically abstract and reference back to traditional African art. Like when I look at African masks and different images that relate to West African traditions. Most of my art reflects on my background. I'm half Nigerian, so pretty much I like to reference that with the figures I use, with the shapes that I paint, and the colors. So I like to find a certain rhythm in my painting and like to use layers. I've been painting since I was really little. I was inspired by my grandmother. I used to watch her create things around the household. But seriously, as an artist, back in 2014 when I was in college and I went from a science major to an art major to follow my passion. I was very young. It would have to be back elementary school. And when I saw her artwork, one thing that stuck with me is seeing her artwork and seeing a person of color in her artwork. And it's like, you know, having relations to that, because in school you don't see a lot of paintings or artwork that reference to our people. So just being able to almost like see myself in her work, that really stuck with me and pretty much inspired me to create works as well, so a little girl or a little boy with a similar background can see themselves in my work. I can definitely see her artwork just pretty much telling our story and be our voices telling what's happening in today's time, especially in our community. The way I start my artwork, I start with a sketchbook. Traditionally, I like sketching ideas. I like, drawing out the figures and figuring out the gesture and the subject matter. And then when I transfer it to a panel, when it comes to figuring out the color, I like to listen to music, and mainly Afro beats. When I listen to the different tones, the drum beats, it definitely give me that tone for my painting. I overall like the time and process it takes to make the colors and just to put the layers on the panel. So with my artwork, I've been practicing the idea of like not naming my art, because I like for people to have their own interpretation. But if I were to name it, I would name it, Speak No Evil, because I would think of the concept of just pretty much being careful what you say, because words are powerful. Words can be blessings and curses at the same time. So I would say it took me about a couple weeks as far as like figuring out the sketch and then figuring out the format of how I was going to lay out, and then just overall figuring out the color palette and the shapes. So my painting varies. Sometimes it takes me a couple weeks. Sometimes I pull an all-nighter and be up to like 4 or 5 in the morning painting, especially if I'm like really, lost in my art and painting. Okay, so my explanation of this art piece, it's pretty much about community, being together, growing up in a village type of thing. one thing I always wanted to do is be part of my community. I want to give back. I want to inspire others. And I want to be that role model that I didn't have growing up, pretty much, because, you know, it's very hard to come across what, you know, other Black artists. So I would hope that one day with my work, like a little kid will see my work and just be inspired like how I was with Aminah. Definitely, I want to leave a footprint here in Columbus. I want to be, especially since I was born and raised here. Growing up, I always thought it would be nice to work in a museum, but the older I got, I'm like, I want my work to be in a museum. So yeah. And so over the years, I had some people compare my artwork to Aminah, especially, I guess, with the exaggerated features of the hands. And I saw that too, and when I looked at her artwork, so we have that similarities, and then her idea of storytelling. So I like to tell stories with my art, so it's not just a figure just staying there. There's always a story and a meaning behind my images. My experience doing the mural was such a blessing. It was a blessing to work with two amazing artists and just overall have us collaborate our different styles and create this beautiful image. It was just pretty much, the whole process was smooth. Working with Lance and Marcus was definitely a good opportunity for me. I know everybody uses that statement, art is life, art is pretty much expressive, art is therapeutic. Art is pretty much my voice. You know, there's certain things that I can't verbally express, and art has been my outlet every time for me. You can email me at adobii93@gmail, so it's ADAOBII93@gmail, or you can find me on Instagram is Adobe ADAOBII11. Definitely be on the lookout. I plan on doing so much more in Columbus, and thank you for having me.
My name is Lance Johnson. I'm a visual artist, muralist, born and raised in New York, but just recently moved to Columbus, Ohio. Super excited to be a part of the community here, and I'm looking forward to bigger things here in Columbus and just getting soaked up in the community. My art is about layers, so I'm inspired by a few things. One, my first initial inspiration was the Harlem Renaissance. Fell in love with just the energy of the movement and the collaboration between the artists, and just being in New York and growing up in the Bronx, I didn't know that being an artist was a possible thing. And when I saw the Harlem Renaissance and I saw the community that they created, I was so inspired, and it planted that seed in me to want to be an artist. And then of course in New York, you know, we had the street art movement, the graffiti art movement, and it inspires my work as well. Professionally, full-time, it's been about 5 years. I was a part-time artist, I was working, but miserable at a 9-to-5 job, and feeling that there was something else out there for me. So I just took the leap and jumped, and I quit my job, and I just dove in full-time, and it's been an inspiration for me. There are pockets in New York that are similar to this scene in Columbus. There's the beauty of the Columbus art scene for me is the collaboration. You know, I see so many different artists collaborating and organizations collaborating, and I love that about that. And it's a smaller city, so everybody is intertwined in some way, right? In New York, you had that movement in certain areas, right? I lived in the Bronx, right? I had a collective of artists that I worked with, and we inspired each other, but the vastness of New York is the biggest difference between Columbus and New York. For me, art is therapy, right? And art is everything, right? And I'm all into multidisciplinary projects. So for example, I did a residency in Ankara, Turkey, 2 years ago. And it was a hip hop cultural exchange. And I had to figure out a way to incorporate my visuals with the rapper, with the DJ, and with the dancer. And we came up with this at the end of our residency, which was like a month long. we had a concert for the public. And we figured out ways on how I can incorporate the visuals with the dancer. So we decided to do this multidisciplinary project where I would paint the dancer as she was dancing. And I kind of brought that back to Columbus last year when I was at Wonder Ball at the Columbus Museum of Art. And I painted a ballerina as she was dancing in front of my art piece. So multidisciplinary is so important to me. I love it. Well, words of inspiration are the foundation, the soul of my art, right? It's all about layers for me. Like growing up in New York, I would see walls that had old graffiti mixed with new graffiti, torn posters, some urban decay. And for me, the beauty of that is you can see the history of that wall in the piece. I mean, when you're walking by, you see the old with the new and the torn posters and the weathered. And I love that. I try to incorporate that in my work. So the words are the soul, the foundation, and then I layer on top of that with paint and spray paint and acrylics. And it's just all about the layers to me. I want it to last beyond just the initial view, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, this is called freedom, right? And I'm growing up in New York, right? There's a lot of movement and energy and vibrance, right? But you try to find serenity in that. And I always try to convey that when this is a silhouette of a person, right? And they're surrounded by all this chaos, right? And energy, but there's still serenity in her, you know? There's peace and tranquility in her, even though there's so much going on. And that's how I always felt, like walking around in the city and just, noise and loud people and colors, but you still find your serenity. And that's what artistry is to me, it's finding that serenity in the midst of chaos. So that's what represents this piece. So if you just see the word inspiration, dreams, wisdom, shine, and at the top is freedom. For the first time I ever stepped foot in Columbus, I was talking to an art collector in New York, and she was telling me about how she discovered this amazing artist in Ohio, right? She had been coming to Ohio to meet with Faith Ringgold and discovered Aminah Robinson at the same time. So she's like, there's synergy with your work and hers, you gotta meet this person. And she actually had a book of Aminah's work. And I started looking through it, and I was just so inspired by not only her process, but how prolific she was as an artist. And I love how she painted on doors, because that's my thing too. I love to paint on doors and windows and stuff like that. So art is everywhere, and I feel like I'm a kindred soul to her. I think she would just keep evolving, as an artist. And I feel like she would be in tune with the times and the trials and tribulations of what's going on right now, I think that would definitely show up in her work, with all the protests that's been going on. And I feel like she would definitely channel that in her art, as we all should, we all should do that. I was honored to be selected, I feel like art is therapy, and to be able to share my artistry and create something that kids throughout the neighborhood will see, and just like when I saw the Harlem Renaissance, it can plant a seed in them to say, oh, this can inspire them to want to be artists as well. I feel like everybody should create, there's an artist in everybody, right? And I just want my work to inspire I want it to evoke some sort of emotion in them. I want them to see something that inspires them. My website is ljartlife.com. My Instagram is LanceLJArt. And my Facebook is Lance, Lance, Jay Art.
Page 2 in the Life and Times of John T. Ward and the beginnings of Second Baptist Church, 1836, Columbus, Ohio. Second Baptist Church had its beginnings in the First Baptist Church, May 15, 1824. 7 members who formed the First Baptist Church were Black, In 10 years, the black membership increased to 16. The black members were dedicated to the abolition movement. So strong was their protest against slavery that the colored branch was formally recognized by the First Baptist as Second Baptist Church in 1836. Reverend Ezekiel Fields was its first pastor. In 1847, slavery was a burning issue that split the church. 40 members withdrew in friendship and formed the Anti-Slavery Baptist Church. The James Preston Poindexter was called to be their first minister. In 1851, the Anti-Slavery Baptist Church was incorporated by John T. Ward, and a brick church was built on East Town Street. Membership was 104.
My name is Angela Finney, and I've really been working on art since I was a young child, and I've always done it on the side. It's something that I had an interest in, but wasn't always encouraged. Maybe a lot of people aren't, because there's always a concern on parents' part that you're not going to make any money if you go into something in the arts. But I still, even when I had other jobs, I always did art and took art classes on the side, and still do to this day. And I retired early. I used to be a social worker, but I retired as early as I could, saved my money so that I could have free time and could work part-time for the most part. So I retired earlier. As you could probably tell, I'm not a spring chicken, and I retired in my mid-50s to devote a lot of time to art. And I mainly do 2D art, though with all that time, I've tried a lot of things. The things I like most are doing printmaking and painting and drawing. So mainly 2D is what I like to do. I've been submitting work to the Martin Unites ever since it started. And so in many ways, I was notified this year, and I had already done the portrait of John Lewis when he died. It was just something, his life really moved me, and at that time there was a lot of reflection on his life. And I was so impressed with his personality and how hard he worked for so long for civil rights and justice. And so I just did that piece at that time. And I've been with this COVID, keeping us cooped up has really been a good thing for me and my art, because it keeps me in a habit of working almost every day. And so pieces like that, it's not something that I even knew if it was ever going to be shown. I just did it because that was emotionally what was affecting me at that time. And my art has evolved to doing portraits, largely doing portraits, even though I like to do many things. Portraits seem to be where I'm able to make an emotional connection. And to me, it's important to make an emotional connection with my art, to express my emotions, to express the emotions of what's happening around us, and to, if I can make a connection with people that way, that is the most meaningful part to me of doing my art. Yes, this piece about Colin Kaepernick is called Woke. For me, you know, Colin Kaepernick, that really was closer in time, and people were so upset. I mean, not that there aren't some people that are still upset, because every time, like I hung this year I hung this where I live, I hung it on my front door because I really couldn't be a part. With COVID, I didn't participate very much in the protests, but I still wanted to be a part of that, so I hung this piece on my front door. But even at Martin Unites the first year, there were lots of people saying, why did you do that? This piece also for me was woke because I needed to really fathom out and realize as a person that doesn't have to live with the threat of violence like people of color do from every day driving their car, or I really had to, it really made me research and think about it. So I felt that I was woke. I feel that Colin Kaepernick in his place in society, for him to do what he did, he was woke. I do think that she would be more concerned with today how to advocate for social justice. What I think her works would be exploring that in a unique way that would touch people and be more convincing to people that there is systematic racism and that we really have to change for there to be any progress. Right now, I am on Instagram. It's just Angela Finney. I do have a business called Angela's Animal Art because when I first retired early, I was still trying to make commercial with success with my art. And also, that was the first way I connected with people. I did a lot of pet portraits, and I still do pet portraits for people. So, Angela's Animal Art, I have some art on there, but I think I will, as I become more prolific, I do have a lot more people portraits now, and I will start a website, and it will be Angela's Fine Art. Just thanks again to the King's Art Complex for giving me this opportunity. I'm very honored.
My name is Marcus Dixon. I'm a fine artist. I mainly specialize in oil paintings and realism. I'm based in Columbus, Ohio. 2-4, to me, growing up, Kobe was like, he was like Superman to me. You know, like we all had Jordan, but me growing up, seeing Kobe, his mindset, dedication, it really gravitated me towards him. He didn't have the size as everyone else, but with all the dedication and hard work, he was able to achieve what he did. So when I got the news, unfortunately, of the passing of everyone on the plane, including him and his daughter, it really, it shook me because, especially as a parent, to think about that last moment with your daughter, what you may say or do to them, trying to prepare them for the inevitable, it really touched me, so I wanted to do something in honor of him and his legacy and his family. For me, it's just a feeling that I get, I get a canvas and I look at the size and I try to get an idea of what I want, and then I just slowly begin adding layers, and I continue to build those layers, more and more detail until, it's something that I'm happy with, satisfied. So I just really focus on the details, sometimes it's a little tedious, but doing the little extra step, it adds a lot to the paintings, so I'll pay attention to the lighting and working on that contrast, continue to build. That was kind of just like a mood for that moment. For the beginning of that year, I wanted to really focus on black and white and, work on that, continue to get better at my black and white. I do color a lot, so I wanted to push myself to do more, black and white, get back to basics a little bit. So that's what I was working on with these two pieces. But I do a lot of color, but I just wanted to take a break and focus on black and white. A lot of people tell me how amazing it is. They love it, always want to purchase it. I get a lot of inquiries regarding that. And they begin telling me, similar stories about how much of an inspiration he was to them. And, I was an honor to know him and see him and watch him play. This is Mood 2020, basically with everything going on with the pandemic beginning towards the beginning of the year. It was just very crazy times for everyone. We didn't know what was going on. You know, we're just locked down in the house for an extended period of time. I just wanted to make sure I captured that moment in time, you know, for us. You know, it was very interesting time. So that's just how I felt, you know, around the house waiting to see what the next news was on what we would have to do. With Aminah, the first thing that stands out for me is as a kid going to the library, seeing her work all over the library and looking at it. And one thing that's really interesting and inspirational with her work is that, you know, you can always look at it and find something else different, you know, and it captures a moment in time. You know, it's telling a story, you know, so you can look at and see the neighborhoods, like, oh, I remember that, and I remember that store, I remember that street, things like that. That's what I really appreciate about her artwork. I definitely think she would be touching base on everything going on as far as protests, riots, pandemic, because that's what she did, you know, she made sure she captured the moment, you know, so she'd definitely be working on a lot of things. Rob Rose art. Yeah, it's a play on Bob Ross. That was my inspiration as a kid. That made me want to start painting. With my mom, she would turn that on Saturdays. We would go to the art store, get some supplies, and I'd come back, look at the show, and try to follow along with them. You know, so that was my inspiration behind that. It's basically paying homage to him. That's what really made me do that. And you know, with me beginning to paint, you know, I started in beginning of 2016. That's when I really began painting, and that was around the time my mother passed. You know, right after she passed, you know, I got a feeling that I really wanted to create. I didn't know what outlet I wanted to, but for some reason I felt like I wanted to try painting. So I really took the time, dove into that craft, try to do as much research as I can, learn, perfect my skills, and I'm continually working to build and grow. I feel a great energy in the city. There's a lot of talented local artists, tons, so many I can't name, but everyone has a lot of talent. I'm always blown away seeing their work and what they do, how creative they are, and how willing they are to jump in and, you know, put their message forward. You know, downtown on the walls, you know, all their murals, it was very powerful, you know, to see that and to see everyone's hard work. And they all have a voice and they want to be heard. I always want to win, you know, so it's okay, you know, first runner-up, but, you know, I appreciate just being involved in the program. I appreciate King Arts Complex and Blick for the opportunity to be involved. You can follow me on Instagram, RobRose_art, Facebook, Rob Rose Art as well. Just stay tuned. I have a lot coming up. I'm working on my show. I'll keep you posted on that on my socials. So just keep looking forward for that.
I'm a fabric artist. My name is Don Coulter. I also go by Don C. Born and raised in Columbus, Ohio, and I've shown my work actually nationally around the country and exclusively at the King Arts Complex. I've been an artist probably since I got out of the womb. I come from a family of artists. It started with my grandfather, my dad, and my uncle. I actually have them featured in this piece here. My dad's the first one there, as well as I even some other influences like the great Aminah Robinson, Elijah Pierce, Ernie Barnes, and Walt Neal, my uncle William Coulter, and it started with my grandfather George Coulter. Well, my family has traditionally been oil painters, so they started out just painting oil. I got into fabric as kind of an unusual story. So I think hip hop had a lot to do with me getting into fabrics. I remember just in high school, we would go to Schottenstein's department store, and we would get these like lightly torn jackets, and we would even tear them, rip them up some more. And what we would do, we would sew in fabric on them, and then I would paint little scenes on them. So that kind of got me into the habit of working with fabric. At that point, I left high school and I started into college, and I took a fashion design course. And we went to, it was a field trip, and I went to one of those fabric stores like Joann's, and I saw this green fabric. And I didn't know what I was gonna do with it, but I said, I'm gonna go ahead and buy it anyway. I think I bought like 4 yards. And I stayed with that fabric, and then just happened to be one day I went to my dad's house, and he had this golf course that I was looking at. And I said, you know, voila, that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna create a golf course out of that fabric. But let me kind of back up, because there's also another part of that story. There was a class that I had taken my freshman year in college, and we were studying Cubism. So the assignment was basically where we had to create a painting, but we couldn't mix the paint. So we just had to use like pure colors. We could do different hues of a color. So what that did, it kind of made us look at a subject and break it down into different shapes and different forms. And that's how you basically determine how the color was going to be made. So from that exercise, I kind of got the concept of saying, you know what, this can be done even without paint. So that kind of laid down the foundations, and all this stuff didn't come together at one time. It kind of just came in different pieces. So there was me growing up in the hip hop era and working with fabric. There was that trip to the fabric store. There was that class that I had taken, and then just going over to my parents' house and seeing this golf course, which was the first fabric piece that I ever created. I saw Aminah Robinson artwork. Actually, I was CCAD, the professor had actually shown me some of her work, and I was pretty much taken by it. It wasn't the first time that I really ever heard of Aminah Robinson, because, you know, all of my life I've been hearing about all these great African-American artists that came from the community. But that was really the first time that I really got to really see her work in depth and see all the great colors that she would use. And I think one of the things that really was the biggest influence on me was that Aminah Robinson, her connection with the community. And I really love that, and I always try to incorporate that in some of my pieces. Yes, I actually had a chance to meet Aminah Robinson. It was at the King Arts Complex, and it was actually doing a show that I was featured, and she gave me a really great compliment on my work, and she's, you know, just kind of encouraged me to continue to do what I do. Very much, again, inspired with Aminah Robinson's work. And you can actually see some of the influences that Aminah Robinson has on my work. As I mentioned before, just the connection with the community, as well as taking up some social issues on some of the pieces that I also work on, and just really everything that she did. And then it's just the coloring. And then also, you know, a lot of people make the connection with my work and her work, which is the use of fabric and the use of just, you know, a lot of materials that are not traditionally used in what we see as for artwork. In the future of my artwork, right now, I think a lot of people, I get a lot of positive feedback on how I create the artwork, and I'm very appreciative of that. But I also want people to kind of recognize what I'm creating. For an example, I mean, I created one piece, and I thought that it was like a really good social piece, and it was like the biggest message that I ever put out there. And somehow when people saw the work, the focus was more on how I created it. And I even had one person say, you know, you make some really beautiful pieces, but you got to address some social issues. And I'm like, you might want to take a look at that piece again and really kind of look at what I'm creating. And I'm glad people love how I create it, but also look at what I'm creating, because there's a message behind the art. Typically, my inspiration is typically all fictional. Even if I do like a landscape or a city scene, I have to create it from the head. The process, I can create a piece of artwork within a couple of weeks. I've had some pieces that I've taken up to 2 years. Obviously, I didn't work on it constantly within 2 years. I may have taken like a month or two off and then kind of go back and work on it. So depending on how much detail goes into the piece, again, it could be anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 years. So this piece right here, this is a piece of me. And what it is that I'm looking at all these influences that were on my life, starting with my father, Donald G. Coulter, the great Aminah Robinson, there's Elijah Pierce, William P. Coulter, who's my uncle, Ernie Barnes, Walt Neal, George Coulter, my grandfather. These are all great artists, and they all had a major impact on who I am today. Well, this scene here actually is a dedication to the 70s. Again, it's a fictional scene, but I wanted to really do something that was a fun, really feel-good moment for the 70s. Unfortunately, while I was creating this piece, this was around a time where there was a lot of protests that were going on. Unfortunately, we seen the murder of George Floyd. So as I'm creating this piece, some of those things started to influence me while I was creating this piece. So as you can see, so a lot of things are incorporated. And then I thought about it was that, you know, this is a 1970s piece and I'm putting some of these elements in it, but then I've also thought about, you know what, those same kind of issues were going on in the 1970s as well. So this is all relative. For the future of artists of Columbus, I think it's bright and I think it's on the rise, especially this past summer. I think that the artists, especially the young artists, really came out and they really shown that they had a voice. And I think the future of Columbus, I believe that the artists are going to be the leaders. I think that if Aminah was here today, her artwork would probably take more of a social tone, just dealing with some of the things that we experienced these really not the last couple of years. I think this has been coming on for the last decade or so, but I think that her artwork would reflect the times. I would tell Don at age 10 to basically continue to do what you're doing, stay the course, and always go with your gut instincts. Because I don't, through the course, again, I'm creating artwork through fabric, and I've had a lot of people tell me, don't do it. It's more or less like kind of gimmicky. It won't work. It'll never see the light in a gallery. And honestly, my career has been everything except that. You know, I've been in galleries, museums. I've been able to show all across the country. So if I'm looking at a young 10-year-old of myself, my thing was to encourage him to go with his gut instinct and stay the course. You can find my work at donce.com. That's DONCEE.com. That's my website. I'm also frequently working with the King Art Center as well. So check me out.
Page 3, Life and Times of John T. Ward and the E.E. Ward Transfer and Storage Company. In 1899, the Ward Transfer Line assumed the name style of William S. Ward's youngest son, Edgar Earl Ward, who was born in 1881, and matured to become family leader of the E.E. Ward Transfer and Storage Company. Edgar Earl, as a child, would sit beside his father, William Ward, on one of the 2 or 3 wagons constituting the business of his father on East Broad Street stand. The firm name, E.E. Ward Transfer and Storage Company, was headed by the youngest son, E.E. Ward, Wakeman B. Ward, Cortland R. Ward, Blanche Ward, and of course the founder, William S. Ward. The company is now operated by the survivors of Wakeman B. Ward. Present management is Marie Ward Smith, Harold E. Ward, and manager Eldon W. Ward. 3rd generations of owners celebrating 101 years since 1881, loyal service to the community, and the great contributions made by John T. Ward to operation of an underground railroad station to aid runaway slaves. Timelessness of Life, Pages in History. Copyright 1982, Aminah Brenda Lynn Robinson.
Hey everybody, welcome back. So in here, what I'm going to show you is the kitchen. The kitchen's one of my favorite places. I've never cooked so much food in my life. The reason I say that is because it's really cool looking. So what I'll show you guys first are the cabinets. So if you look up above, we kept the integrity of the space with the cabinets exactly how they were, didn't take them out, anything. So you're seeing the OG cabinets, which is great. And then you can just see like the art, how the house is turning into a space with art, or a constant art, I would say, because it's just free form. It's almost like a kid playing. So you're getting like these really cool, like almost Aztec-like designs down here, which are super playful. And they're so playful you can just even see the drip running down. So these kind of things have like the integrity, keep the spirit of Aminah alive for me. So that's why I cook a lot in here, because this is probably the most saturated of all the rooms when it comes to like Aminah's work being integrated into a space. Then obviously, if we look around, we'll have more signatures on the walls. And then, you know, one day in the history of Columbus, Ohio, just titled, and once again, enhancing those names, which is a beautiful thing. The great thing about this is you get to see the original wall, the original paint, the plaster. So you can tell that the house has age and wisdom in it. If we run along back here, this is probably the most highlighted space when it comes to the work, people writing on the wall. And then once again, a nice form that Aminah made, and it's archived extremely well. And then obviously the bang for our buck, the most exciting thing is going to be the floor. It's a mosaic that Aminah made. Now, at first, with this floor, there was a huge table over top of it, so you couldn't really see much of it. And then obviously the museum restored the floor, and then it just brought this lush, beautiful piece. Now the cool thing about this floor is that this is something that you would make over years. This isn't like a project you do, you know, in a day. So what you're gonna see on this floor are different variations and different thoughts and different times. You'll see one of the foxes on the top right, that's reflective in the story that's in the dining room, which is really cool to see how she uses two different mediums for one thing. Then in the back here, you're going to see just like, almost like volcanic, almost kind of like forms, which is like marbles, obviously buttons, just tons of stuff. So then you have your tiles and the rest of it. So I spend surprisingly a lot amount of time in this room. But yeah, this is the richest area of art in the house. So this is the real deal. And then back here, this is Aminah's sanctuary. This is the studio. So this is where I spend a lot of time working, and I'll show you guys around in here. All right, so what we got in this room is a couple of things. We'll start with Aminah's area, then we'll talk about me for a second. So what goes on over here? This is Aminah's table. So this is where we honor her when we work in the studio. She works in here every day with me. And the cool thing is, like, we have an idea of the workflow, once again, in the pictures. So just imagine, like, working just the discipline and all the supplies, right? And now you can see some of the stuff over here where she'll repeat, like, you know, she'll take and recycle things and use them as holders, right? But these are all her brushes, all her material. So if you're wondering, you know, what kind of paint she uses, there you go. If you're wondering how she gets those rich, bright colors, there you go. Once again, buttons, strings, just tons of stuff. So it's really cool to have her material and her space beside me while I work. What I do personally, I do paintings and then I draw comics. And what that looks like is a few different things, and I'll show that off to you guys. As an example, painting-wise, we can do things like this, things that are more realistic. I painted this back in 2012. So this gives you guys an idea of what kind of paintings I do and what they look like. Furthermore, I'll show you guys a few more. Here's another one. This one's from like, I want to say 2015. Just another example of the work. And then this is kind of like the evolved style out of everything. So this was painted last year. So this kind of gives you an idea of my work. And this goes back to Aminah in a lot of ways, going back to texture, forms, those kind of things, expression. So that's where I do a lot of my painting at. And then in here, over here is where I do my comics. And so just standard setup for comics. I'll give you guys a sneak peek of the cover that I was working on for my book. So when doing comics, it's kind of a whole different style. So you wouldn't really notice or really wouldn't make sense or like look the same, meaning the paintings to the comics. But I'll show you guys a few examples of the work. So, you know, I'll mix mediums sometimes, but the artwork is pretty traditional, pretty straightforward when it comes to a comic. And this one I'm working on for the Columbus Museum. It's about COVID and that whole experience and how an artist lives during that time. So yeah, so this is where I work, and I sit with Aminah all day. So I really appreciate you guys coming by, checking the space out. Thank you.
So much a part of my work, but it was the soul of my life, as it is the soul of the community in which I grew up in. It is a place where everyone connected, where everyone neighbored, where everyone did what they did, especially artists, writers, musicians, institutions, businesses. Roman Johnson and Emerson Burkhart, I first met them on the street. They both were introduced to me by my father at the age of 9. And I, along with other artists of my age and my generation, began to sit on the curb and work with them. It was a way of life. I think that's what's so important about Mount Vernon Avenue, that it was a way of life for the people of that community. Not so much as an importance which does not enter into that way of life, but the soul and the heart and the spirit of that life, which continues today in all of our memories.
We hope that you have enjoyed today's presentation. We would like to thank all of our sponsors once again and all of our partners for the 2021 All Arts Day honoring Aminah Robinson. We would also like to thank artists Ada Obinna Ijoma, Lance Johnson, Angela Finney, Marcus Dixon, and Don Coulter. And of course, we would like to thank Aminah Robinson for leaving a legacy of artwork that will live forever. Enter for a chance to win the Aminah Robinson t-shirt from Homage with her quote, "My dream is to grow, to know, and to grow some more." The first 5 to complete the essay questionnaire will win this t-shirt. The link to the questionnaire is in the program description. We also invite you to complete a patron survey about today's event. From now until December 2022, when you become a King Arts Complex member at the $100 level, you won't be just supporting arts in our community, you will be gaining access to a host of great benefits, including discounts for performances and on the King Arts Complex online marketplace, waived youth programming registration for 1 year, waived Heritage Music Festival merchant vendor fee for an entire summer, and your name featured on the King Arts Complex website for a year. For more information and to sign up today, please log on to kingartscomplex.com/100 Club. Mark your calendars for Saturday, May 15th, 2021 for the King Arts Complex 34th Anniversary Gala, honoring 4 remarkable women, Yvette McGee Brown, Gail V. King, Dr. Cheryl Lee, and Teresa L. McWayne. For more information, please log on to kingartscomplex.com.